Hey guys, welcome back to Tower of God New World. In today's video, we're going to be looking at ideal teams for the mid-game push, kind of like once you get past that chapter 10-ish range, moving into chapter 16, which is where you start fighting two teams, and that's going to be a different kettle of fish once we get there. But I wanted to look at the optimal teams for pushing as hard as you can. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this down. I'm going to start with using 2 SSR pluses in your team, scale it back down to if you only have one of those ideal options, and then scale it back down to if you have 0. Just know that the big variables on how big of a deficit you're going to be able to push, the first is going to be which SSR plus units you have. That is going to be a big effect because there's 2 key roles that you really need to fill. And then the other one is how lucky you got on dupes for your main carry as well. So the basic, what I consider the quote-unquote best team formation is going to be having either Data Zahad or Data Mashini, which is the blue SSR plus. Those two both work as very good stall tanks. And they're normally ones that I leave lower leveled, leave the higher leveled slot for my hyper carry, which for me is going to be Hats. But yeah, having one of those two is going to be fantastic. Now, you don't have to put them in the front middle slot. That is technically your tanking slot. But as you play, you will mix them around through every slot, depending on the RNG and the enemies that you have. So that is going to be the first unit that you really want to have is a stall tank. Because if you start pushing beyond 2 times deficit between 2 and 3 and even further, you just get hit so hard, and something like a Karaka is just not going to cut it. He just dies too quick. So having one of those 2 units as your tank is going to be very important. Moving on past that, we have Evan. Now, Evan is just the best sustain. The way that this synergy works between having one of the data units and Evan is that they basically take all the heat, have their invincibility so they don't die, and stall long enough that Evan can go ahead and use his ultimate to then make everyone invincible again, and then basically fully top everyone off. So those 2 as a core is huge. Once again, I will scale this down if you don't have these units. I just want to go from the best and scale it down through. Now, past that, you can go into the rest of your team, and it depends what you want to be your main carry. For me, I went with Hats. Once again, getting dupes is very important. If you don't have Hats, if you don't have a well-duped SSR, then you can look to something like a Kel if you've got lucky and have her. Otherwise, you're just going to have to use the best duped SSR you have. Now, one that is going to be a good option if you like, who works decent at lower dupes. So Hats needs a ton of dupes to really get functional. Whereas if we go over here and we go to someone like Wang is actually really strong. He gets stronger earlier without the dupes. He can still do big damage, but he's not as functional with Hats once you get the dupes in the defensive sense, because Hats can actually take some hits and absorb some heat. So once again, we're looking at this along with this, and then you're going into your DPS. For me, it's Hats. Once again, you have to choose whatever you have. Then from there, you can choose a purple or a yellow core. When you're playing with Evan, and especially if you're playing with Evan and Hats, your core is obviously going to be a yellow core. Now, for me, there's one sort of no-brainer option that you take in there, and that is going to be Bum. He is like your battery and buffer for your Hats or whoever your yellow main DPS is, or whoever your main DPS is. He just works fantastic. And for me, from chapter 10 through to chapter 12, this has been my team core all the way, and it never really changes from this. Then your last slot here, especially if you're running 3 yellows, becomes a flexible spot. Often for me, originally I was trying Rock, but he's sort of just a suicide useless unit until you get dupes and he can start surviving a bit better. But for me, I swap between Hua, Gray as well, and then the other one that I normally swap between is going to be, I don't even know her name, but that one is Yeo. Go Sing. Yeah, dude, why do the names have to be hard for me? But yeah, she's the other one that I normally swap between. She's the more offensive option because she like buffs Hats further at the start of battle. She is a great option because she's got a really good fear for controlling the enemies. And then her is when you've got like a back row. For me, I often use her when I've got this guy as an enemy at the moment because he always sits in the back row. Then he jumps and snipes my back row. So he's normally the one with the highest attack. So when I use her, we can just target him and nuke. Now, keep in mind with Hua, you've got to really set your team up well so that she doesn't get insta-killed, because she does run into melee range, but if you do it right, she can work. But that's pretty much what you're looking at as the optimal, from what I've found, core. Now, like I said, you can go for a more of a purple core. I just think Hats is the optimal carry DPS to go with. But I do think like Rachel could be an option. I don't think she's that great. I wouldn't recommend it. Endorsey is still an option, but I find Endorsey is more for a cheese strategy now. So I definitely think Hats is the play. Now let's move on past that, and let's say you have one of these tank units, but you don't have an Evan. So what I like doing then is my strategy, which is what I used on my other account where I had the Data Mashini, is I was using him as my like, once again, my tank to take all the hits, and then I was using the Endorsey cheese. So what happens with Endorsey is she can actually group the entire enemy team. It doesn't work every time. Sometimes it's 1 in every 10 fights she does, but she'll teleport before the enemies move, and it leaves them in a nice little group. So she'll run in, she'll proc her passive where she ducks back, and then she'll jump back in and die essentially. But then you've got your tank who's going to sit there and take all the hits while the rest of your team ramps up. Now from there, you want a unit that's going to deal some AoE damage. So one for me, it depends who your carry is. So most people, if you got Hats, it can still work. He's not optimal because he's not always going to hit all units. I was doing it with Kel if you have her. I mean, you could even do it with a Karaka DPS for cheese. He gets in there and then he can ult, and then everyone's right there, and then hopefully he does it on their face. Other options you have, Wang, once again, the dude that throws the balls who I showed earlier. He's going to be a great option because the enemies will be grouped up and his ult is just going to absolutely cone in on them and shred them. However, you got to be careful for assassins using that strategy. But that is honestly my favorite strategy without having an Evan, because it's like the quickest, it's like a quick nuke team. And with that that strategy, what I like using in it is the purple core, where we bring Endorsey obviously, but then we also bring Rachel, because Rachel is going to be able to group those enemies up. So once again, Endorsey is going to stop them moving, and then Rachel's going to use her vortex and she's going to swirl the enemies together so that they are in a tight little package. Then you want, once again, that AoE carry damage dealer, whether it's something like a Wang or something like that. And then your final slot is going to want to be another purple unit, and then we have Kun for control as an option, and otherwise you've got I'm just going to put her over there. And then otherwise you've got, I always call her Anima Chick, but what's her actual name? Nere, dude, I suck at names. But she's the other option. She's more of your battery buffing unit for your main DPS, and then you've at least got a 3-piece bonus here, and then you can put your DPS in. Like I said, Wang's a good option for people. I have seen some people using the sleepy guy with the pillow, who is another option. He's a green unit that would give you a 3-2 bonus. But in general, I think most people's first carry is going to be normally one of the yellow units, because they seem to be the optimal. Or you could have the Endorsey as the carry and see as she goes. But if you are grouping the whole enemy team, it is going to become a bit of a struggle. So that is the team, if you don't have Evan, that I personally found the best in this sort of stage of the game. Now, if we move on past that and you don't have either of those two guys, it becomes, you can choose either you want a purple or a yellow core, and you can pretty much run with the same strategies. Now, if you don't have Evan or either of the two data tanks, you'll either have Karaka from your 200 pity, or you'll have Evan Kel, or you'll have the Big Mashini. If you've got Big Mashini, it's kind of rip. I just cannot make her work. But if you've got either of these two, you can use those as your DPS unit, and you can still try and run this cheese strategy. And basically, you're just trying to group them up, spin them around, and then either cheese them all with his AoE or cheese them with her AoE, and you're just basically trying to delete the whole enemy team. Now, for this one, for the odd people who are at this stage of the game who only have Big Mashini as their option, you're kind of left in the dark. So you're pretty much looking at running whoever you want as your DPS, and then you're looking at these core teams, whether it be, and I'll just leave the DPS out because it depends on what you've chosen as your main DPS, but you're looking at essentially having this kind of team core, or you're looking at having the light team core, or the yellow team core, sorry, which is going to involve him. At this stage, you're probably going to include him as well. And then honestly, past that, it depends who you want to play with. But those are the two key ones that I like as supportive units. Once again, Rock will die, but if you don't have any other units, your deficit won't be as high, so he will actually work at less dupes, if that makes sense. And once again, it's just one of those sad things that if you just don't have the copies and the right characters, then you're just not going to push the same deficit, which means these type of strategies become more viable because you're not pushing so hard. But then we've got those other two supportive units that I do like, and then you're probably going to lean onto your carry unit. But hopefully you guys have one of the five SSRs besides the big Mashni, so you can run a proper team. But that is kind of the light core. If you don't have any of them, I prefer the purple core. But I just think it's more solid, it's more control based, and it offers more to survivability as well. And then you've always got those tech units that you can put in. Like Hua is a fantastic tech unit. You can look to this for heals. It depends on the enemy weakness. Now we all got this dude for free if you were around for the event. If not, you've got Yuri, and at these lower deficits without any of the other units, Yuri should probably be decent if you are fighting blue enemies, but then it just becomes a play around. So that's pretty much my summary on teams. Like I said, it gets hard if you don't have any of the SSR plus units, and especially if you don't have any of the SSR plus units and you've been unlucky on dupes on your carry. But essentially you scale down from the essentials being the Evan and the stall tank, and then once again you can phase it through those teams that I went through. But if you have these two and decent DPS, you're pretty well set to do a really, really solid push. But that's it for teams for the mid game. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you're using. Once again, I'm not at 100% right. This is just what I've found from seeing other people pushing, watching replays, and doing my own testing myself. Where at my peak, I was pushing above a 3x deficit. But once again, I will update you guys as things evolve. Just wanted to go through all that. And that's pretty much where we are. But as always, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you have an awesome day, and I look forward to seeing the next one. Cheers.